My next guest is a longtime YPOer and dear friend, Jeff Brothers. He spent his life at the intersection of ecology, leadership, and spiritual awakening. After building one of California's largest cut flower enterprises and later developing utility-scale solar projects across the West, Jeff realized that true regeneration begins not on the land, but in the heart. A deeply transformative encounter with San Pedro cactus shifted his life's trajectory, calling him towards service, ceremony, and conscious leadership. Today is the founder of Shine Ministries and steward of Circles of San Pedro, two intertwined efforts dedicated to reconnecting humanity with nature through sacred practice, community gardens, and regenerative agriculture. Jeff, welcome to Smoke Trail.
Smoke, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And we did it properly. We did a nice hike up on the ridge behind us before.
Yeah.
Which is a great way to ease into
to bond and to connect with nature. And yeah, really grateful for that, and grateful for starting out the new year with you.
Yeah, likewise. It's super great to have you. We were at the YPO Global Business Summit, and I was like, you have to come onto the show, and you're like, great. And then I found out you were here, so like, no better place to do it than together in Sedona.
Yeah, my beloved's parents have been coming here for 25 years. They spend half the year here. We've been here a few times, and it's magical.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's jump right in, and I'd love to talk a little bit about your journey, your background, and kind of the work you're doing. I know you're doing lots of great stuff with conscious leadership, and but you mentioned on our hike that you started doing meditation when you were like 14.
14 years old.
So let's go back to tell me a little bit about the early Jeff years.
Well, it sort of was born from a challenge. My mom developed alcoholism from my age 8 onward. It got more and more pronounced, and my parents eventually divorced at 12. My older brother introduced cannabis to me at the time, and all it did was make me lazy and hungry. So I had a very brief experience with that, encounter with that, and found it wanting. But then the Beatles were right in the middle of doing their TM, and I was very into the Beatles. And so next thing I know, I'm signed up and absolutely devoted myself to TM for a number of years.
Yeah, well, that probably helped you on your path. From we can take different roads, and you could go down the cannabis, getting lazy, not wanting to do stuff, and that probably
kind of checking out,
reset you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and introduced me to a wonderful community as well of people that were.
And where was this?
Recommended. I grew up in a little town in the Central Coast called Watsonville.
Okay.
So, but I learned to meditate in Santa Cruz, and it was kind of fun to be, in that location. Watsonville was right in between Santa Cruz and Monterey. Monterey, Carmel were very conservative. Santa Cruz, less so.
Yeah.
And Watsonville was some, kind of a hybrid of both.
Yeah.
So, I was really enjoyed transcendental meditation and did it, throughout college, and sadly lost my mom to alcohol at age 18. So meditation practice was pretty important for me, just to continue to ground and get through that loss, right?
And do you continue that practice to today? Has it changed over time?
It got less frequent, but still would always be there. Never not had my mantra, as a resource. But interestingly enough, the book Autobiography of a Yogi came into my sphere in the last 6 months, and I think I'm on my 3rd reading of that book, and I've signed up for the lessons at the Self-Realization Fellowship, and in the midst of studying Kriya Yoga, and so I've got the TM to lean on, and it feels really natural.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big part of my 2026 is to focus on the discipline of Kriya Yoga.
That's awesome. I love that garden meditation grounds that he's got there right in your hometown.
Yeah, in Encinitas, right there on the beach.
So great. Every time I go down there, I go and meditate there.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource. I ultimately left, the Central Coast and moved down here a little over a year ago,
Mhm.
and and just being in the influence of Paramahansa Yogananda, it was something that you can detect. It's kind of like being in Sedona. There's just an essence here that is a
Mhm.
frequency or a resonance that is elevated. Um, but it wasn't until I read the autobiography of Yogi that I really should know who is,
Yeah.
the keeper of the keys of what has
It
launched
was,
there
it
years
was so
ago.
wild when the Palisades fire happened and it burned down, most of that neighborhood.
Hmm.
And a couple things were left standing. One was the mall that, you know, uh, what's his name, who ran for mayor, who owns it, protected it. He had his own fire trucks.
Oh, okay.
And the other was the Lake Shrine. But the fire went around it and it was
Wow,
perfectly preserved.
wow! I did not know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Well, um, you went into business, you got into the flower business.
Yes.
So you had a big operation doing cut flowers, fresh flowers. You were growing them.
Yeah, so the family moved when I was 14 to a ranch.
Hmm.
Actually, when I was 12, when the parents got divorced, we moved to the ranch. My mom traveled for a couple of years. She came back. I lived with her for 3.5 years in Aptos, but then ultimately moved to the ranch. But we had this, big ranch and weren't quite sure what to do with it. My dad leased out land to strawberry growers and cattle growers, and I went off to college and living in Laguna Beach when my brother had started this cut flower business on our family ranch and needed some help. And yeah, I always equated to, It's a Wonderful Life and Jimmy Stewart and the Packed Bags. It's like, I do not want to move back to Watsonville. There's no way am I moving back to Watsonville. But it was like the savings and loan, right? Like
Hmm.
suddenly, I was called to help and got there and figured, well, a year or two, then I'm going to Stanford Business School. I'm going to be a captain in industry. I'm going to live in Atherton, and my bags were packed for a long time. The year or two became ultimately a 24-year career in the cut flower industry. We were growers initially, then grower shippers, and along the way, I got interested in mass market, and my brothers weren't, and so we split, and I took the bouquet company and developed a mass market company, which ultimately developed the Costco cut flower program, and then I went public with 7 other companies and kind of realized my dream of being, quote, a big shot in the cut flower industry, and had a lot of fun doing it. And where I sit now, I kind of look back on it, and I was in the emotions business.
Yeah.
I was really in the emotions business. Is helping people say I'm sorry, or thank you, or I
Hmm.
love you,
Hmm.
or forgive me, or get better. And it was really beautiful with the Costco cut flower program because I really connected the grower to the consumer
Hmm.
with as little friction as possible. I was my merchandiser in there, and so literally I would source the flowers from all the different growers and help them move through peaks when weather kicks something off. We could move it through really quickly. Costco loves a treasure hunt,
Yeah.
right? So we'd create a treasure hunt kind of experience there, and had a great time. And did over $100 million a year with Costco, at peak, and it was like fantastic customer and a lot of fun. But after a while, it is a perishable product, and
Yeah.
you own the inventory till it goes through the cash register, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of voices in your head, all the time. And so it was time to ultimately exit the
Hmm.
industry, and I did.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome journey, and there's no right or wrong. I mean, I think there's people that come to consciousness and realization of some sort early in life, and some people it they live a life and then they come to it. And I'm in that category. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
business guy, entrepreneur, creating companies, and came to this part of my journey later, in realization and like, you know, um, but I don't think there's a right or wrong, but I also think there's something to living this human experience fully, having gained experience, and then turning to higher power and consciousness
Mm-hmm.
and appreciating things. And I think we can bring a different lens to the spiritual journey
Mm-hmm.
than someone who, you know, um, uh, Ramana Maharshi fell down at 16 in his, family home, and the ego died, and he didn't speak for 2 years, and then went to his mountain, and he was a very high calibrating, conscious person, and probably helped humanity in many ways. But I mean, he had no experience of living normal life,
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a criticism of him, but it's like, okay, I think there's a lens we can bring those of us who have built businesses, succeeded in the material world,
Mm-hmm.
and now shifting our focus to this more of a conscious leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's kind of a parallel journey a little bit. How did you, you we don't need to get into the whole cannabis story, but I know, we cross paths in that world, and
We both gathered a lot of
yeah,
scar tissue.
scar tissue and learnings there. But um, when did you kind of have somewhat of an awakening, or kind of, a gravitational shift in terms of what you're spending your time on? And
Yeah, well, I was drawn to consciousness, fairly early on, and like on the Farm Bureau board, I was president of Santa Cruz County Farm Bureau when we brought our first organic grower onto the board, and it was kind of controversial at the time. And I'm like, why would that be controversial? They have markets and employees and weeds and pests, and they just have a different philosophy. And I just got to be more and more interested in ecosystems, right?
Yeah.
And being in touch with ecosystems and trying to do it in a way that, like, I even was a Pete Wilson appointee on the California Coastal Commission, right? So I'm a property rights guy. I'm a hardcore, I worked for Reagan my senior year of college, and a couple of years afterwards, I'm a hardcore Republican property rights guy. And I'm one of four Republicans on a 12-member Coastal Commission board. And yet, even though we were in the minority, the different advocates would come and talk to us and explain, why they were, opposed or wanted to improve a particular project. And I think about it, I'm like, why wouldn't you want to do the right thing if it really didn't cost anything more, or didn't cost markedly more, but it was definitely a better thing for the environment, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, that being a property rights guy on the California Coastal Commission turned me into an environmentalist, because people were opposed to doing the right thing just on principle of not wanting to be told what to do. And I'm like, that's just BS. We can be more holistic and more, in my mind, conscious of our footprint.
Yeah.
And so along the way, I just found that I wanted to do business that way. I joined the Conscious Leadership group. It was initially called the Conscious Leadership Forum, with Diana Chapman and Jim Dethmer, and learned an awful lot about the 15 principles and how to conduct, myself. But it really wasn't until a very, very, very dear friend of mine, my a life coach, said, I think you'd benefit from a psychedelic journey. And she led me on a MDMA journey. This was 13 years ago. I was able to shed some trauma that I didn't realize I was dragging around. And felt like I took a 10-pound rock out of my backpack. And like, once that's out, you're like, why would anybody walk around with that, 10-pound rock in their backpack? And I also got mad at the government. I was like, how could this be illegal? This was beautiful. I did more work in 6 hours than I'd done in 20 years of talk therapy. It's not fair that this isn't available, and it's not available because of, not scientific or medical reasons, for political reasons. That made me angry. And that caused me to begin to just really open up to what's possible in terms of, how to conduct oneself, and how to allow trauma to be let go. Because I'm in YPO. We met, through YPO, and there's some extraordinary people in YPO, but many of them are driven because of traumas that they don't even understand. They're unconscious of the drivers, these tapes that are playing in their head. And so suddenly it became an opportunity to, become more aware of how I could conduct myself, and how I could encourage others to conduct themselves, to be more conscious about their activities. I was not present in my family for a number of years. I was always doing the next thing, next thing, next thing, and and a lot of that was driven by you know a fear of failure, a fear of lack, and in the end, it's like I'm really present.
Yeah.
Nowadays.
No, it's a beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. I think MDMA is an unbelievable tool.
Mm-hmm.
My experience was, it's a heart opening thing where you can really get into things that feel unsafe
Mm-hmm.
in a safe container.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can dig deep on things, and it done with the right facilitator, right, resource. It's really an incredible tool to uncover those shadows, put them in the light of day of your consciousness, and address them without all the emotion that goes with it.
Right.
Right.
The charge.
And that's what I've learned is that, nothing can withstand conscious awareness. So there's no trauma, there's no horrible thing that happened to anyone that can't be resolved if you're willing to put your awareness to it and sit with it. And that's not fun.
No.
But on the other side, it's a lot of fun. Like you said, you get rid of the 10-pound backpack or 50-pound backpack, whatever it is. But once you shed that, you clear your own self, and then you can be a resource to many other people, which I know you've become in many ways. So it's a great, I was, I knew friends that used it for more like, concerts and parties and things. And I was just never involved in any of that. And then I got to sit with the medicine along with psilocybin. So it was a combination, and cracked open a bunch of stuff. And I spent about a year digging into all those shadows and sorting them out, and then forgiving and clearing and clearing and clearing. And it's, and like on the other side, it's like, wow, it's a whole different world.
Right. A lightness and a centeredness that is really remarkable.
Yeah, I've said this before, but for me, I was a heavy drinker for decades. Part of my journey was dropping the alcohol. And what I realized in retrospect was I had this like fan going off in the back of my head, and it was this like anxiety that I didn't know what it was. That was just my way of being. And when I would drink, just a drink or two, like the fan would turn off, and I'd feel like normal. So it was, for me, it was getting rid of that anxiety, and it would be like, okay, great. When I cleared my shadows, my trauma stuff, the fan went off by itself. And then I was like, oh, I don't need to drink. It's like, it's fun, but it's not serving me.
And then when you stop drinking, and then you can actually feel what it feels like to feel happy and healthy in your body.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, no, it's true. All right. So MDMA was your first, and that opened you up and started surfacing things. And then you migrated toward San Pedro. I know that's your plant that has called you. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was quite a journey in between, but I joined a men's group, and more or less quarterly we would get together with an MDMA derivative of some sort and gather, and it was really, to me, beautiful that men could be there and kind of hold each other and talk to each other and process things, and did that for 3 years, and then kind of got curious as to what's beyond, and ultimately developed a relationship with psilocybin, and did several psilocybin journeys, mostly on my own, but with other folks, primarily men, and found that to be quite valuable. Got more and more interested in working with veterans, and so one thing led to another, and next thing I know, I'm trying ayahuasca, because it's like, oh, this is something that is potentially really valuable for veterans. And I ultimately joined Menai Church and had an extraordinary experience for about 4 years with them. Really, really admire their approach and their respect and their reverence for for that medicine and the container they create. And somewhere along the way, I heard the call for the San Pedro and had a couple of initial experiences that didn't feel like they were as reverent as what I would have hoped. Finally found a young shaman from Mexico who was coming to Ojai to lead a group. And I couldn't sit with him on the Saturday he was leading this group, but he was available for me to spend the day with him on Friday and help him make the medicine. So I spent the whole day with him on Friday. And that Friday night, when I was getting ready to leave, he handed me a sack of medicine and said, "You know what to do." So I went home a couple of weeks later, cooked up that medicine, actually on July 4th, and myself had a ceremony in my backyard and had a pretty profound awakening. And it was very clearly told to grow me.
Yeah.
Grow the plant.
Grow me.
And I'm like, okay. I kind of hung up my my gloves, if you will, my horticulture gloves. But I was like, I know how to do that. And so I talked to a few folks, got some seeds and got some more seeds and some more seeds, and then bought out a guy's amateur collection of plants, and then got some mature plants and began to grow. And then ultimately had a pretty profound experience. I guess is worth telling. It's not a short story, but it's not long either. These mature plants had arrived in a pile, 250 mature plants. The day I got the news that a lady that had come and worked with my partner at the time and myself for 12 days, who had arrived kind of a train wreck. He'd been booted off Puerto Rico island by her son's wife and told never to come back. And she had raised this granddaughter, this woman's daughter, and was very close to this young lady. And there was some rupture. And so her daughter-in-law said, never come back to the island. And as a grandma who's been raising the son's her daughter had spent more time with this daughter than her mom had. It was devastating. And after 12 days of being with us, she was like this singing angel and really, kind of gotten grounded. And she said, well, I've got to go to Mexico because my other son's a meth addict and he's at a clinic down there. And I heard, got a download as to what happened to him, and I want to go tell him. I'll be down there for a week. I really don't want to go be around those addicts, but I'm going to be down there for a week. I'm coming back to spend a couple months with you guys. She kind of reminded me of my mom, this short little lady that had an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was able to help her over 12 days. Like, I can't wait to work with her for a couple of months, right? This is fun. I get a do-over. A week later, I get a phone call expecting it's her at the airport. She's calling me to ask her to come pick her up. And it's her son who's at the clinic and said they gave her ibogaine. She had a heart attack and died. She's not coming back.
Wow.
And it just gutted me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get a do-over. Like, I didn't get to say goodbye to my mom the first time. And it's like, I don't get a do-over. And these 250 San Pedros large plants were in a pile. And so the next 10 days, 2 weeks, I just dug a hole and planted a cactus and dug a hole and planted a cactus. And that's what grounded me and helped me get through what ended up being a pretty dark period. And then I was really bonded with those plants, and I couldn't wait to make medicine from those plants, and ultimately led a YPO group of 19 people in a ceremony with medicine from those plants. And that kind of created this relationship that I have today with the San Pedro. It's just really, really strong bond. And I see people able to get in their hearts and connect with each other and connect with nature in a profound way. That's really
neat. And you do it in a ceremonial way, safe container. I think it's very, very important because I think we got a lot of amateur hour people dabbling, which, I'm not against, like, experiment, figure out your own thing. But I think when you get a group together that's not properly, I don't know, supervised is the right word, but guided with the safe container, with people that know what they're doing, because you're gaining access to all kinds of different things. You can get access to the astral realm. There's all kinds of not so nice entities in that realm that are stuck there, and it's really important to have people that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now, I think you said you ran 36 retreats last year.
30 retreats.
30 retreats
in 2025. Yeah,
that's a lot of people going through.
a lot of people. I started off the year with leading a group, mostly YPOers, in February, and it was fantastic. And this was, at our home, and one of the participants said, you need to get this into the world, and she forced me to sit down and map out, a dozen ceremonies for the rest of the year, and then people couldn't quite make that work, and so another one happened, and another one happened, and it ultimately ended up being 30. I sort of over-indexed in 2025. I only plan to do 16 in 2026.
Yeah,
but they were fantastic, and it was a fabulous education to hold that. I always co-facilitate with someone else at least, and it's always live music, and if it's a larger group, at least one, if not two, additional guardians. And I do think having a very safe container, very sacred container is really, really, really important.
Yeah,
and it's also, as you know, a long experience.
Yeah,
we start at 9:30 in the morning, and I let people know that it's like 8. Don't plan to leave before 8 p.m. at night.
Yeah,
it's a big day.
It's a long day. I got to sit and be an angel in a ceremony last May up in British Columbia with Yvonne Rados, who's one of my teachers and very connected, mystical guy. And it was a really interesting experience to be there to hold space for, I think it was 7 men who were all going through a journey, and to be there for them, helping them as they went through it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's special. From an economic standpoint, it's not how you want to make a living overall, but from a purpose and fulfillment standpoint, it's exceptional.
Yeah. So what I mean, you now had a lot of people go through it where you've been hosting these things. What are some of the things that you see unfold for people or uncover or whatever? Like before and after? Are there some like things you've learned along?
Yeah, sure. Well, most importantly, structurally, you have to create a lot of space for a day to be there, right? And we really encourage people to not have a lot scheduled the next day. So preparing for being there and then recovering afterwards, they have to create some space, and then we ask them to to work on their intentions when they show up, right? So they've been thinking about it, and they get there, and there's just this collective sigh of relief of, okay, I'm here, I'm fully present, I'm nervous, what's going to unfold, and then they find that there can be calmness in their bodies, in their physical systems, right? That they can actually feel their feelings, they can feel their heart, they can feel connected, they can feel connected to the folks in the room, and they can feel connected to source, and they don't have to effort to do it, and they're not checking their devices, and they're just really there, and it's almost like a shock that they can be that present and that calm when typically they're not. And then they can have conversations and talk about things and share things that wouldn't have felt comfortable to share before being in that container. But suddenly there's an allowance, safety and vulnerability that's mutual, and so the real work is really done by themselves and with each other in a co-creation. We create a safe container and sort of set the ground rules, but the medicine in their own subconscious ends up doing all the work. It's really beautiful.
And then what do you what do you tell them after? Because I know people who have done a weekend retreat, done a journey, they had all this profound learning, and then they go back to their normal life, and it reverts. You got to integrate what you learned.
Right. And we put a little more emphasis on integration than most can. Yet the pull of regular life is there.
Yeah.
And I encourage them to develop a little practice of like, a small breath, breath work practice,
Mhm.
so that when they begin to feel, some anxiety, whatever, just get back to that breath work and put yourself back in that situation where you're in this circle. And it can happen in like 30 seconds to a
Yeah.
minute. Like, boom, you
A
pop
few
right back
deep
in.
breaths, a little bit of just, and then you can reset.
Yep, and reset. And many of them, I mean, they've dropped drinking, or there's some profound things that have happened. They've shifted in terms of how they parent, how they show up in a relationship, and um, it's rarely a one and done.
Mhm.
But the what I'm happy about is you're not blasted to the cosmos and you come back, 30 minutes later and like, what happened?
Right.
You're
It's a pretty mild experience.
right, very gentle, very
Yeah.
subtle. My beloved Caitlin likes to say it's the most subtle, unsubtle thing, right?
Yeah.
It's subtle and gentle, but it's profound.
Yeah.
And because you're so present through the whole thing, that presence, that embodied experience is not something that's easily forgotten.
No. And it's almost like, I mean, I think all these plant medicines of different sorts, it's almost like they pull the veil. Like our brains are basically like filters, right? So we're only getting certain things. That there's a lot more happening everywhere. It's energy world, all this stuff. And those medicines kind of drop the veil, and you have access to a lot more. And it's like, whoa, once you see that, it's like, okay, it's profound.
Yeah. We had one gentleman who'd been raised in like South Central Chicago, and very urban environment, and he had raised himself tough, exceptional athlete, and now he coaches professional athletes, and he's top of his game, extraordinary human, um, and this was his first experience of any type, and he did it out of respect and trust of the person that encouraged me to hold this ceremony. And in the middle of the ceremony, he goes outside, which, San Pedro really likes the outdoors. Right?
Yeah.
It wants you to be outside. You
Yeah.
want to be in the sun. And,
Yes.
and he's looking around and kind of seeing the trees and the grass and the sky in a different way. And he looks down at his arm and he sees the sunlight on the hair on his arm. He says, I've never seen that in my life. Like, this is all around me.
Yeah.
It's all available to me. I live in Encinitas now, right? Like I'm not in, Chicago anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm missing it.
Yeah.
Now I'm not, right? Now I can raise my kids to enjoy this. I can actually, like take advantage of where I am and what's here by just being present. And what a gift, right?
Yeah.
And it was so neat.
Yeah. No, I love it. And, you talk about conscious leadership. For me, that's about reconciling your own issues first, because no one can help anyone else unless they fix their own shit. And once you've cleared your shadows and you've gotten whole again, my friend Liv says, and I use this all the time, humans are the medicine for each other.
Right.
But you're only the medicine if you've cleared your shit, right? So if you can hold space and you're present and you've, dealt with your things, then you can hold space for anyone. Like if in the past someone came to me and started telling me about some problem they were having, I'd be like, I'm really sorry for you. Let's go get a drink, And now I find people come to me and I'm like, okay, I can hold space. I can listen to them, and it doesn't mean I'm going to solve their problem for them, but being able to hold that space is extremely valuable for each other.
Yeah. And to not be there to give advice or to solve, but to be there to inquire, right? And let their conscious and mostly their subconscious, have a way to express itself.
Yeah.
Usually the answers are there.
Yeah. The answers are lie within, but we have to be quiet enough to hear them. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so proud of you for the path you've chosen and how you're using your intelligence and heart and connections and network, et cetera, to help people on this path. It doesn't take a huge nudge, but it does take, some guiding, right?
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it is, when I started, I just was oblivious to all this. I didn't know any of it. And I like jumped in. I was like, whoa. I asked for help. I was in Nepal and went to Buddha's birthplace, and something came over me. I prayed there and I asked for peace and love. And that set me on my journey. But you have to ask for help. But if you ask, you have it. Like the universe will provide it. And so some of what I've been called to do with the podcast and other things I'm working on is to give a tangible roadmap of some sort that can be useful for high achieving people who are like, maybe they've knocked it out of the park. They've been very successful economically. They made a lot of money. On the surface, they're, like perfect life. And we all know we have a lot of friends who are in that situation, and they're like, whoa, what is there something more? Making another $10 million doesn't matter really. What is there more? And so as I've discovered that path, I'm like, okay, well, let's see if we can just distill that learning that could be helpful to some people. And it's not like pushing it on anyone, but it's like if you're watching this podcast, you're called to it for some reason. And so it's more of a invite. It's like, okay, here's what I'm learning. Here's what I've worked for me. Pick what you want. Pick what's useful. Drop the rest. But it's kind of because I think the challenge of our time is, if we were, growing up hundreds of years ago in some village, if we were lucky, it might have been a village with a ashram or something, and some people that could recognize things, and if you had some kind of propensity to that, they would pull you in, and there was a tradition of it. But most villages didn't have that, and so it was like people figured it out on their own or not. Today, in the modern era, certainly in the Western world, we have access to everything. We can read the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. We can read the Buddha. We can. There's all kinds of people throughout time and modern teachings. It's almost like the challenge is discernment and figuring out what makes sense for you in your own path. But we have access to everything, which is great. But it's like drinking out of a fire hose. So it's kind of like curating and trying to figure out, like, all right, these are useful for this is useful for that. Because it's kind of overwhelming in the beginning when you just open your eyes to it and you're like, whoa, where do I even start?
Right.
If you start with the Bhagavad Gita, which calibrates in the 900s on Hawkins scale, it's a very, spiritually true text, because it's at that level. It's not going to make a lot of sense if you're at 300 and you're just kind of starting your journey.
Sure.
It's still useful, but when you reread it a year later, you're like, oh, all these things start to open up. So it's like there's a progression of learning, I think, that helps unfold people to it.
Yeah, I completely agree that there is so much available. It's hard. It can be confusing, how to even start. And the world we live in is bombarding us, constantly with things to distract ourselves with.
Yeah.
And there's so little embodiment. That's, I guess ultimately why I feel so called to the San Pedro. It's such a great entry point in terms of any psychedelic to just be here and feel safe to be in here and to feel heart and feel feelings that, that sometimes we're nervous to feel. Just feel them in a safe container with others that might be strangers when they walked into the room, but 12 hours later, you're like besties with.
Yeah.
And you can have this embodied feeling of being in your body, feeling your feelings safely with others, and feeling connection to source in a way that it becomes supernatural, but isn't natural otherwise, right? And just to have that space to feel that way, and then once you go back to your normal world, you can't unring the bell.
Right.
You've had that embodied experience, right? And then you crave more of that calmness, right?
Mhm.
You want more meditation. You want more people that are that community, if you will, that want to connect on that level.
It's a really important point. I mean, when you go back after having an experience like that, building a practice, building something into your routine that keeps you grounded and connected to what you experienced. But the people we spend time with, there's an energetic level of what they are. And it's really important to curate that over time, right? So, if your friend set at one stage may not make sense to be your friend set later. And it's kind of naturally occurring. It's just kind of like that I don't hang out with those people anymore because they're not where I am, and I'm hanging out with people who are working on, consciousness or whatever.
Really being here.
Yeah, being here, being present.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that? Is there a website or is there a...
Yeah, I ultimately formed Shine Ministries in 2025, towards the end of 2025, and we're just wiring up our website, etc. So shineministries.org.
Okay, put it in the show notes.
Yeah, which is, well, actually, I say that shineministries.org we couldn't afford. We will at some point. So it's shineshine.org.
Okay,
shineshine.org.
All right, awesome. Well, I appreciate the work you're doing, and I know you're helping a lot of people, and it's really important in this time. There's lots of people messing around with medicine that don't know what they're doing. I think it's really important to find trusted sources who know and appreciate the plant and appreciate the tradition, and will create that safe container, and don't just go to like a rando event, because there's a lot of you're accessing other realms, you're accessing energies that aren't necessarily friendly to humans, and so it's really important to be in that kind of a place in this. So, well, thank you.
Yeah, it was a delight to spend time with you. The hike was great. Your studio is spectacular, my friend.
It's God's studio. I just happen to be using it at the moment.
Extraordinary, and it's really, really great to be sort of reconnected with you.
Yeah.
And I look forward to like our parallel paths crossing again.
For sure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
All right, brother.
Okay.